Welcome to The Road to Innovation, powered by the Kleinert Foundation. On each episode, we delve into innovative solutions to society's most pressing issues like sex trafficking, homelessness, and poverty. We hope that with each conversation, you'll be inspired to take actionable steps towards social change. Here's your host, Hannah Rabelais from the Kleinert Foundation.
Welcome back to the Road to Innovation podcast powered by the Kleinert Foundation. I am your host, Hannah Rabelais, and today we have a very special guest, Mr. Daniel Roby, CEO of the Austin Street Center and one of my favorite nonprofit leaders here in Dallas-Fort Worth. Daniel, thank you so much for being on the show with us. We're so excited to have you and just to learn more about you and what you're doing over at Austin Street. But before we kick things off and kind of dive deep into what you're doing at Austin Street, I would love for you just to share a little bit about you. What's your background? Because you've been working with this population since growing up. Didn't you volunteer at Austin Street growing up? And
I did.
You lived in Oregon working with the same population over there. So just give us a brief background of you and why you are doing the work that you're doing.
Well, Hannah, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to get the chance to be here and to share with you all about our experiences at Austin Street, what we've seen, what's been helpful, and how you guys can be a part. So, my story is I grew up here in Dallas, Texas, and I had the wonderful privilege of going down with my church and serving a meal at Austin Street when I was about 7 years old. And that planted a seed in me that grew over time. Got involved in one homeless service organization after the next. And before you knew it, here I am many years later, many years and decades later with a chance to serve in this role. After that, my mom used to make bags of non-perishable items that we would hand out to people. I got a chance to go to Baylor University, where I interned with Mission Waco and was a poverty alleviation organization there in Waco, Texas. Had a couple homeless individuals live with me when I was in college. That was an educational experience. And then finally moved to Portland, Oregon, where I got a chance to work with two nonprofit organizations serving the homeless, Transitional Youth, where I ran Homeless Youth Drop-In Center, and then later on Portland Rescue Mission, an adult emergency shelter, not too dissimilar from Austin Street Center, before coming back to my hometown.
Wonderful. So share with our audience a little bit more about Austin Street. Is there like a specific focus in the homelessness area that you try to address, or is it just a shelter? Let's dive in.
Yeah. Well, Austin Street provides safe shelter and meets the basic needs of the most vulnerable homeless. And we really seek to transition people out of homelessness and into a permanent place to call home. So we get a chance to work with a more vulnerable population. Typically, we work with women who are over the age of 18. Most women who are on the streets are physically, sexually victimized in some way. And so pretty much by being a woman and being homeless, you're already at a significant disadvantage. You're already vulnerable. You're already likely to be victimized. So it's really important that you have safe shelter, because especially at night, all kinds of things happen on the streets of any major city. And Dallas is no different. And so important for us to provide safe shelter to them. With men, we work with men who are only over the age of 45.
Why is that?
Well, health conditions can be different for people who are homeless versus people who are housed. If you're 45 and homeless, you have the health conditions of someone who is about 20 years older and housed.
Oh, wow.
In fact, people who are homeless have 5 times the likelihood of having a traumatic brain injury. They're 6 times more likely to have depression. And they're 10 times more likely to commit suicide, twice as likely to have a heart attack. So many things are going on with people who are homeless. They're exposed to so many more, infectious diseases. So many things are out in the community. So there's so many things that we're trying to protect them against and safeguard them from. So we're working very diligently to serve a more vulnerable population.
Wow. So what are some of the innovative programs that y'all do in Austin Street? Is there something that you're doing different than any other shelters, or what are you taking the charge on here in Dallas?
Well, innovation is definitely a key focus for us. We consider ourselves sort of an incubator for programs that we find others latch onto and replicate, and we love that. I think that's a part of our mantra and focus. Just this year, we're launching a number of programs. We have a medical respite program that we're doing in partnership partnership with the local area hospital. And the idea behind that is there's so many homeless in and out of emergency rooms on a regular basis, driving up the cost of health care that's often uncompensated for, and that homeless individual eventually gets discharged back to the streets where that medical situation gets worse, and then they go back to the hospital again. So instead of that, that hospital is going to take care of their medical needs, and the hospital then transition them to Austin Street Center, where they're going to provide ongoing medical care while we do what we do well, which is provide that safe shelter very efficiently, and then make sure that we transition them to a permanent place to call home. So they've got a place to live, in an apartment or duplex or similar environment, and then connect them to community supports. So we really end the cycle and end their homelessness while taking care of their medical issues through our partnerships. And that way, we've really changed the trajectory for that individual. So medical respite's been a focus. We have got a new transportation project where we transition people to about 15 homeless service agencies by a bus that connects these organizations. So we're excited about that. And we have got a new housing program as well. So lots going on in Austin Street that's new and different.
Talk about sisterhood and what you're doing specifically with women over there.
Well, the Sisterhood program was really born out of the creation of a lot of innovative ideas from both our board as well as our staff. We knew that women that we served were more vulnerable, and specifically being out on the streets, we had more women who were coming to us that needed a safe place to go during the day, and we had more women who were coming to us that were being sexually victimized, traumatized with it being out on the streets. And so we decided we needed a program just for them. A lot of times, there were a lot of great programs in our city for, women who may experience some kind of domestic violence or abuse, intimate partner abuse. But if that individual may also have issues of mental health, may also have issues of addiction, may also be experiencing unsheltered homelessness where they're in a tent encampment of some kind, and maybe their person abusing them was in that tent encampment with them, that may not be the best environment for them. So we created an environment just for them, so women who have experienced trauma, who are also homeless, have a safe place to go and have wraparound support care. And we had great partnerships come along with us to be able to care for these women and transition them again to a permanent place to call home.
So what does an average day look like for an Austin Street client? So what time do they come in? What does that process look like? What other services do they get during the shelter time?
Well, it's definitely a process. So we have over 150 people who are enrolled in what we call a housing coordination program. It means we've identified what's the pathway for this person to no longer be homeless. And they're working with an assigned case manager. We have programs for veterans or people who are employed in homeless, again, for the sisterhood that we talked about. And so they're working that program and working on their journey out. We also have a lot of shelter beds, so we'll have hundreds of people that come in the afternoon. So, women who are coming around 2 o'clock and men at 4 o'clock, and they'll come in, and there'll be a number of services that will be offered between when they come in and when they finally, go to bed for the evening. Everything from, spiritual support programs to NA and AA groups. We'll have veteran support groups that happen. So all kinds of services available. And we'll also make sure that our case management team, opens themselves up for any questions that people may have. So if people need information about housing resources or whatever it is, we're there to support people that are in need.
So what does the issue of homelessness look like here in Dallas? Because I feel like it's something that we see, but especially like if you're not homeless, you don't know how to interact with that population, or what is the reality, like how many people are out on the streets of Dallas. And then I know recently that there was a homeless count. Is there any data or insights that you can share from that recent one or something from 2019? What does this issue look like here?
Sure. Well, Dallas definitely has a growing homeless challenge to address. There were over 4,500 people, who were counted as homeless at the last point in time count. That's just the number of people that were identified on that one night. It doesn't encompass all the people that we know who are homeless. There's an estimated 10,000 people who are homeless in the city.
Wow.
And so we know that the numbers are higher than what's reflected in the count. That being said, unsheltered homelessness has grown by 500% in the past 5 years. When you look at a city the size of Dallas, you look at how Dallas has grown. We've had over 1 million people move here just over the past over the past year in the Metroplex. And so when you have that kind of population growth, you're going to have a population growth of homeless as well. And you also have increasingly affordability issues. So more and more people who are working are finding themselves falling into homelessness because they can't find an affordable place to live. And so we're definitely seeing more and more people in that situation. So 4 to 5 new people come to Austin Street every single day. And so that's a big challenge for us to overcome as well.
So how does someone become homeless? I know there's not just one way, but can you just touch on a couple different aspects of it? Because I feel like people just assume that that person is lazy or
Sure.
there's so many just misconceptions around people who become homeless. So can you just shine some light on how someone becomes homeless?
Sure. A lot of times people think of homelessness and poverty as the same thing. There's definitely some things that are similar and some things that I would say are different. The way we talk about define homelessness at Austin Street is that poverty plus a crisis of some kind, minus a social support or real community support is what really equals homelessness. So if you experience, a lack of resources and then you have a crisis, and depending upon, how many resources you have, that crisis could be big or small. It could be something like your car breaks down, you can't get to work, which means you lose your job and then you're no longer able to pay your rent. It could be a medical bill you can't afford. It could be a natural disaster. It could be a number of different things, that crisis, and then the lack of social support. So if you don't have a brother or sister that you can call, a friend or relative of any kind that will take you in a time of need, if those people are also experiencing intense poverty, so they don't have any resources to lend to your aid, then that's when people really fall into homelessness. And the reality is we have over 500,000 people in the nation right now that are facing that situation. And so there's lots of people, and we'll have all different backgrounds, all different types of folks. We've had folks that have PhDs that have fallen into homelessness, teachers that have fallen into homelessness. And so, all different types of people that experience that.
Yeah, my husband and I volunteered. I was telling you in the elevator earlier, we volunteered at the Homeless Count. And so if y'all don't know what that is, it's a night where about 1,500 volunteers in Dallas come. There's an app, and that you're supposed to ask people who are experiencing homelessness a set of questions. Very intimate, gets very personal. And, some people, it's not required to answer, but you have to ask them. And it was just incredible to hear. One of the questions like, how'd you become homeless? Or what's your background? What's your story? And one woman was like, I went to SMU. I have my master's. And I was just like, you just think that because you have a college degree, you were safe from this. And then another gentleman shared that something that you just don't think about, the layoffs at Borden recently because they went bankrupt. Yeah. Like I was affected that way. So you just never know. Or people like, I had a computer degree, I had an office job, or, I was home, or I had a family member who was able to take care of me, but they got tired and kicked me out. And I've been here ever since. And it's just like, there's not one type and one person that becomes homeless. You just never know. And again, the crisis can vary. Yes.
I always say that there are no homeless people. There's just people. And they happen to be experiencing homelessness at that point in time. And so you never know what brings people into those circumstances. And it's often something different than what you might imagine.
Exactly. So how difficult is it for someone to transition out of homelessness?
Well, I think it depends upon the person, right? And so the barriers that someone may face towards recovering a home of their own, once again, is going to depend upon, what the person's background are. At Austin Street, we have some people that have a lot of different disabling conditions. They may struggle with mental health and addictions and physical disabilities. Right now at Austin Street, we have about 60% of our folks that have chronic health issues like type 2 diabetes or hypertension, about 25% that have a physical disability, maybe about almost half that have a mental mental illness or a mental diagnosis, health diagnosis. And so, there's definitely those, but then we have a ton of people that will come with us, stay with us for a very short period of time that just kind of fell on hard times. They need a little bit of support, and then, they're able to, resecure that job, resecure whatever income sources that they're able to access on their own and be able to be off and running again. They just need a little help in the meantime. So, our programs are designed to support people that have the greatest need, but we're also there for those that just need us for that short while. The important thing is to kind of be that safety net for people wherever they happen to fall, and make sure that we're there for them, and that we've been doing that now for over 36 years.
Yeah. Wow. So let's dive into a little bit more about the barriers. So you mentioned the affordable crisis here in Dallas. Can you just talk about that, and what does that mean for people experiencing homelessness? And because you look around Dallas and you're like, well, there's apartments everywhere.
Yeah, right.
We're growing. I can buy a house.
Building, right?
We're building. We're growing. Everything's great. But that's not the reality. When you look look underneath, and when you look how much rent is, and you look at these apartments and what's being offered, and then the decreasing amount of actual affordable units is just shocking. So can you just touch on that a little bit?
Sure. Well, just briefly, if you look at the development of housing, even though Dallas has really led the market in terms of development of new units, they have been almost without exception luxury units. And so there's been virtually no affordable units that have been developed over the past 2 to 3 years. And so with that, at the same time, there's been a large number of affordable units that have been demolished. So we've lost thousands and thousands of units on the affordable side, and replace those with luxury units. And so
look at the Knox Henderson area. I mean, that's where a majority of them were.
Example,
I mean,
right?
It's 2 years ago, you could see those, and you can kind of see the divide. But now, I mean, entirely wiped out neighborhoods. Yeah, if you're from the area, I just wanted to point that out to you.
It's really scary to me, and I think if we don't want to be like some of these cities that we see on the West Coast, Los Angeles, San Francisco. Seattle, I think we've got a lot of work to do to make up some ground, so that we can make sure that we address people, they're the most vulnerable members of our society, and provide some support, to empower them, to be able to transition onto a new life.
So what other some barriers? Because I know healthcare is a huge medical debt in this country is just astronomical, and especially if you have diabetes, getting insulin. So that would prevent you from getting out of homelessness.
Yeah, we have some challenges with payer source discrimination as well. So there's not really a requirement that people accept Section 8 vouchers if they're able to get those. A lot of times the people are able to make say minimum wage, but if that's not enough to be able to meet the units that are in the marketplace, which are more expensive than that, they're going to need some kind of supplement in addition to their income that they're making to be able to afford that place. So a voucher, would be something that would help them to do that. But a lot of landlords are saying, hey, if I'm able to get, fill my units, without that, then, I really, don't want to accept that. There's a lot of red tape involved, and hey, I get that. The challenge is that leaves so many people without access to the units that they need. So we've got to figure out some way to be able to allow people to have access to the units that they need, and make sure that we gain the kind of community support that recognizes, hey, the statistics show that affordable places to live don't decrease home values. They're proven not to increase criminal activity in neighborhoods. A lot of the fears that people have are not founded, and so let's support recognizing that Dallas is a city for all people.
Yes.
And in that way, we can create an environment that allows everyone to thrive.
What are some other myths surrounding homelessness? Or is there an aspect of homelessness that we don't talk about enough? Just I want to debunk some things.
Sure, yeah. A lot of things I guess we could debunk. One of those is a lot of people assume, they connect addiction with homelessness. And the reality of that information just doesn't always line up. So, if you look at demographics nationally as well as, locally, here, you'll have about 30 to 40% of people who are homeless, struggling with addiction. Those numbers aren't too dramatically far off from what national statistics say for all people, in the U.S. And so, there's not that many more people that struggle with drugs and alcohol that are homeless than are in the general population. So a lot of times it's easy to say, hey, someone who's homeless shouldn't have these kind of struggles, whereas, we wouldn't have the same, desire to be able to say whether or not someone, would drink alcohol or something like that, that has their own place to live. So I think there are, that's not quite the same as an unsheltered population. So you do have increased usage of drugs and alcohol with people who are unsheltered. And what that tells me is we need to make sure that we give people access to their basic needs.
Yes.
Because ultimately, any person who's put in a place of crisis, when they can't even have a roof over their head and food to eat, they make poor choices. And so we have to make sure we give people access to those things so that, they're not trying to cope with, just making sure that they can live till tomorrow.
So what is an aspect of homelessness that we don't talk about enough? Because I know we see people on the street and, what we just kind of talked about, but what is something that we're not talking about enough?
I think a number of things. One would be, the 1 in 10 people that are homeless that have fought for you and for me, for our country, and yet find themselves without a place to live. I think there's something about that for all of us just hits as not right and not okay.
Yes.
That someone would do that and then come back to the United States, having served our country and not be able to support themselves and have access to their basic needs and to a home. So that's one thing that always disturbs me that I want to make sure to address. Also, the increasing growth in elderly homeless. We're supposed to have that number is expected to double over the next decade or so. So I think we have a concern there, and then also the overrepresentation of minorities. So we have way more people who are minorities facing homelessness than we should. So what are the systemic issues that are driving that? And how can we respond to make sure that we give everyone an opportunity?
So this question is one I want to know personally, but I think it's so important to address, and I want to hear from you. So if you're in your car and you're stopped at a stop sign and you see a person experiencing homelessness, they have the sign,
Sure.
Please give me money. What is the best way to interact with people who are experiencing homelessness? I've heard 10 different things. Don't give them money. Don't look in their face. Roll down your window. Tell them there's so many. I've heard so many different things.
Yeah, right.
But in your opinion and your insight, please share with us, what is the best way? Because I know, most of those people want human connection, and there's a
Sure.
respectful, dignified way to do that.
Sure.
But just please share, what can our listeners do when they're pulling up on that street corner?
Sure. I'll say a couple things. First is that studies show that not all panhandlers are homeless, and not all people who are homeless ask people for money. So those two groups aren't always the same, and the number is about half and half. So about half of all people who are asking for money are experiencing homelessness. Now, that's not to say that people who are asking for money don't need help, that they're not struggling with poverty or that they don't need resources. It's just to say that they may not be homeless. At the same time, most people who are homeless, the majority, never ask anybody for money. They never ask anybody for help.
Wow.
So they're out there struggling without access to their basic needs and never ask for help. And I think that should sink into us a little bit to recognize that, when we think about people who are homeless, oftentimes we're not thinking of the people who are really experiencing it. Those people go unnoticed.
Oh, wow.
In terms of what to do when you encounter somebody who's on the street, I am one of the folks that would always advocate for eye contact and for a smile, regardless of who the person is or what they've experienced. Everybody needs, a sense of human contact. It's so easily be isolated when you're on the streets, to be disconnected from society, and you never know when a warm smile and a kind hello can bring a about a process that will eventually lead to change. So I always encourage that. I'm not encouraging people to be, necessarily unsafe. So keep, aware of your surroundings and what you need to do. But yeah, I would definitely encourage, a kind gesture of some sort. So, but yeah, I don't generally give out money, to people when I see them. But I always make sure that I smile and I say hello, and I usually introduce myself. So
what about like giving food? Like that's kind of been my approach. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's like, well, one, I don't have cash, so I'm waiting for the day someone pulls
Sure,
out a Square
yeah.
reader to like, hey, I can swipe your card right now.
Right.
But usually my approach is like, if you're asking for food
Yeah.
or something, especially at the gas station, I've had several times like, can you just like buy me gas? Like, is that a proper way to do it, or just
Well, it's interesting
it's a
that you
gut thing?
mentioned that, because there was a study done that said that tried to figure out whether or not people used money that was given, for drugs or alcohol, because that's the big concern, right? Actually, the number one thing that was used with money that was given was food. The number two thing was alcohol, but number one thing was food. And I think that was interesting because, oftentimes it's different than what we think it is. I think what that told me is, people, do have a need for those things. There's some concern in areas for whether or not, trash will become an issue, because when you give out, things that, have a lot of, discardable items, and those things, aren't disposed of properly, then neighbors a lot of times will complain about there's a lot of things being handed out, and then that ends up building up in a community, and then the neighbors complain. So for me, I let people kind of make their own decisions about what's right to do. I definitely have certain things that I will pass out that I know people utilize. The number one requested item for someone who's unsheltered is usually socks. So that's a big thing to give. Usually most communities, and here in Dallas there's a great example, there's resource guides that you can hand out to people that helps connect them to other resources. It's amazing the little bit of information that can change someone's life. And so if we are able to get people connected to resources, so often I'll talk to people and I'll say, hey, have you ever come down to Austin Street Center? And they'll tell me, oh, I'm not allowed down there. And I'm like, really? I'm like, what's your name? And they'll tell me their name, and I'll just double check, and they'll be like, I don't know where they got that information, but they're more than welcome to come down, and then we'll get them connected to housing. Before you know it, they're back on their feet again. And it was just some kind of misunderstanding that someone had told them that you have to pay to go to Austin Street, or someone had told them some kind of wrong information. So, information can really change lives.
So how can people get involved? How can they help Austin Street? I know you'll have a big event coming up if you want to share.
We do,
yes.
yeah. So I'm so excited. April 29th is our biggest event of the year. It's our luncheon, and Leslie Odom Jr. is so kind and generous.
If y'all don't know who he is, then you need to catch up.
He's amazing. So he is going to be performing as well as speaking.
Oh, I didn't know about the performance.
Yeah,
okay,
so singing.
y'all. Yes.
Yeah, so
dinner or lunch and a show. Wow.
And his band is coming, right? So I don't know if you knew that. But
no,
he's not just
I did
singing.
not.
Yeah, his
oh my
whole band
goodness.
is coming. So he'll be singing songs from Hamilton, if you're a fan of Hamilton.
So if you couldn't get to the Broadway show,
there you go. You
the
can
tickets
come
are
to
about half the
luncheon.
price,
That's
so there's
right.
no excuse.
Right. And also he'll be singing songs from his new album that was just released. He has a book called Failing Up, which is about the struggles of overcoming, which I think really hits home with a lot of our viewers, listeners, people who care about our mission. And so we couldn't be more excited. April 29th, it'll be at the Omni here in Dallas. We'd love for everyone to come out and show their support. So that's probably our biggest event. But I would say be an ambassador for the cause. Make sure to educate yourself and to educate others on the issue of homelessness.
Where's the best place to find resources and on facts surrounding homelessness?
Yeah, that's a great thing. Definitely go to our website at www.austinstreet.org. There's all kinds of information there. There's blogs on there that have information. There's information on the event, austinstreet.org/events. You can purchase tickets there to that event. And so that's a great resource place of information. And continue to share. Our social media is a great place for information.
Yes, it is.
So we're always pushing stuff out, whether it's Instagram or Facebook or LinkedIn. It's not just luncheons and events, but it's also educational facts about people that come to our shelter in need of help and how their lives are changed and transformed from our work. So,
what other volunteer opportunities do you have? Do you serve meals?
Oh,
What
yeah.
does that look like for y'all?
So we have lots of individual opportunities. So and it's funny, I was talking to one of our volunteers just the other day, and when you help check in, so we have volunteers that check hundreds of our clients in every single day. You get to know people by their first name, and so all of a sudden, all these people that you may see on the streets, instead of just a homeless person, become Frank and Jerry and Fred and Alicia and Kendra and Sarah, and you get to know their face and a little bit about them. And so all of a sudden, these are people that you really understand and a little bit about their story. And so encourage people to come volunteer individually. Love for folks to come and serve if groups is more their thing. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Would love for folks to come down and bring some food and serve our guests. Sometimes that's lunch for maybe 100 people or so, or it could be dinner. We're serving all 400. So go to our website. You can fill out a volunteer form, and all that information will be provided to you. So definitely we'd love to have that as well. And service projects, we have big service projects for corporations that want to come and help us clean the shelter, help us paint, help us clean our beds, and
there's always something to do.
There's always something to do, right? So not short of that. So.
Was there anything that we didn't talk about or touch on that you wanted to share, or do you want to close us out with something? I just want to make sure we get everything out.
No, I think we covered it. I appreciate you guys having me out here and us getting to address the issue of homelessness. When we think about homelessness, I often think about Mother Teresa and something that she used to say, which is homelessness isn't just about houselessness; it's also a sense of unwantedness. There's a need for the community of Dallas to come around and support its homeless neighbors, and so together we can support this community, and we've seen real change. My first year at Austin Street, we transitioned 80 people out of homelessness and into permanent homes.
Wow.
My second year there, our team, one at a time, transitioned 167 people. And then in 2018, 373. So year over year increases of impact, and the community has enabled that to happen. And so I can't wait to see what we're going to be able to do the next year because of everybody's support. So.
Well, that's all I have. You drop mic. There you go. Yes. Well, Daniel, again, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you all so much for listening to our podcast. Please visit the Austin Street Center website and also attend this wonderful luncheon coming up. And there's more on our website and their website. So just thank you so much for listening and have a great day.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of The Road to Innovation, powered by the Kleinert Foundation. If you'd like to learn more about today's social innovator, please visit kleinertfdn.org or the podcast website at theroadtoinnovation.com.